Miss Patricia Donovan moved through the bustling elementary school cafeteria, navigating between tables of chattering children with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. As Oak Ridge Elementary's counselor for the past 11 years, she had developed a sixth sense for spotting trouble, a child sitting alone, unusual silence where there should be animation or tears hastily wiped away. Today, her attention was drawn to Emma Reynolds, a quiet second grader who had transferred to Oak Ridge just 6 weeks ago. Emma sat at the end of a table, methodically arranging her carrots in a perfect line while her sandwich remained untouched. Unlike the other children who had shed their jackets in the overheated cafeteria, Emma kept her faded purple cardigan buttoned to her chin, despite the beads of sweat visible on her forehead. Patricia paused by the table, offering a warm smile. "That's quite the carrot formation you've got there, Emma. Are you building something special?" Emma's eyes darted up briefly before returning to her lunch tray. "It's a fence," she whispered, so softly Patricia had to lean closer to hear, "to keep the bad things out." "That's creative," Patricia responded, sliding onto the bench across from her. She noticed how Emma subtly shifted, angling her body away. "Aren't you warm in that cardigan? It must be 80 degrees in here today." Emma shook her head vigorously, her mousy brown hair falling across her face. "I'm cold. Mom says I get cold easy." Something in the girl's tone triggered Patricia's professional radar. "Mind if I join you for lunch? My office gets lonely sometimes." Emma shrugged, neither welcoming nor rejecting the company. A response Patricia had come to recognize from children who'd learned that their preferences rarely mattered. As they sat together, Patricia gently drew Emma into conversation about safe topics, favorite subjects, art, her new teacher, okay, the book tucked beside her lunchbox, about dragons. Slowly, Emma's rigid posture softened, her shoulders lowering incrementally from where they'd been tensed around her ears. It happened when Emma reached for her milk carton. The cardigan's sleeve slipped back just enough to reveal a pattern of angry red marks on her forearm, small, circular impressions, arranged in an unmistakable cluster. Patricia kept her expression neutral through years of practice, though her heart rate quickened. "That looks like it hurts," she said casually, nodding toward Emma's arm. The change was immediate. Emma yanked her sleeve down, eyes wide with alarm. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "I fell." "Into what? A stapler?" The words slipped out before Patricia could catch them, her usual professional filter momentarily overwhelmed by concern. Emma's face went blank. That particular emptiness Patricia had seen too many times when children retreat behind mental walls constructed for self-preservation. "I have to go to the bathroom," Emma announced suddenly, standing so abruptly her milk carton toppled, sending white liquid streaming across the table. "Of course," Patricia said, already gathering napkins, "but maybe stop by my office afterward. I have some new colored pencils I could use your expert opinion on." Emma hesitated, then gave the barest nod before scurrying away, leaving her lunch and backpack behind. Patricia's gaze followed the small figure until she disappeared through the cafeteria doors. Then she pulled out her phone and snapped a quick photo of Emma's abandoned lunch tray. Protocol for documenting potential cases. Her mind was already cataloguing what she'd seen. Circular marks, evenly spaced, consistent with bite impressions. Human bite impressions. She gathered Emma's belongings and headed toward her office, stopping briefly to speak with Ms. Gonzalez, the second-grade teacher. "Emma Reynolds might be a little late returning to class. She's stopping by my office. After the bathroom." The teacher nodded understandingly. "Everything okay?" "Just getting to know our new student better," Patricia replied with practiced casualness. "By the way, have you noticed anything unusual about Emma? Any concerning behaviors or interactions with other students?" Ms. Gonzalez lowered her voice. "She's very withdrawn, flinches at loud noises, and she's been falling asleep in class." Not the bored kind of drifting off, but the exhausted kind. Patricia nodded, adding this information to her mental file. As she continued toward her office, Emma's purple backpack clutched in her hand, considerably heavier than it should be for a 7-year-old. Emma didn't go to the bathroom. Instead, she slipped through the school's side entrance, pressing her small body against the cool brick wall, breathing rapidly. She hadn't meant for anyone to see. Mom would be angry, very angry. The air outside felt sharp in her lungs after the stuffy cafeteria. Emma counted her breaths like Dr. Sanders had taught her at the last school. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The counselor had seen. The nice lady with the colorful scarves who smiled at everyone had seen what Mom called private family matters. Emma looked longingly at the playground, wondering if she could hide there until dismissal. But running would make things worse. It always did. Besides, her backpack was still inside with her special notebook. Reluctantly, she re-entered the building, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The door to Miss Donovan's office was open, warm light spilling out. Emma hesitated outside, reading the colorful sign decorated with handprints. "You're always welcome here." "Emma, is that you?" Miss Donovan's voice was gentle. "I saved your lunch if you're still hungry." Emma stepped inside, immediately scanning the room. Her backpack sat on a chair, still zipped closed. Good. The office was nothing like the stark counseling rooms at her previous schools. This one had a small couch with mismatched pillows, a low table with fidget toys, and walls covered with student artwork. "I'm not hungry," Emma said, though her stomach betrayed her with a low growl. Ms. Donovan smiled but didn't comment on the contradiction. "Would you like to sit? I found these amazing new colored pencils that blend together. Maybe you could test them for me." Emma perched on the edge of the couch, accepting the pencils and paper. Drawing was safe. Drawing didn't require answers. As Emma sketched, Miss Donovan worked quietly at her desk, occasionally asking non-threatening questions about favorite colors and animals, never once mentioning the marks. After 15 minutes of comfortable silence, Emma had created an elaborate forest scene with a small cabin hidden among trees. A thin wisp of smoke curled from the chimney. "That's beautiful," Miss Donovan said, moving to sit beside Emma, careful to maintain space between them. "Who lives there?" "No one," Emma replied quickly. "It's empty." "Empty houses make me a little sad," Miss Donovan said. "Everyone deserves a safe place, don't you think?" Emma's pencil stilled. "Some houses look nice outside, but are different inside." Miss Donovan nodded. "That's very true, like people sometimes." Emma added more smoke to her chimney, pressing harder with the pencil. "My mom says I bruise easy because I'm special." "Special how?" "My blood doesn't work right. That's why I get marks even when things don't hurt much." The rehearsed explanation flowed easily, but Emma's eyes remained fixed on her drawing. Miss Donovan was quiet for a moment. "Emma, part of my job is making sure all students at Oak Ridge feel safe. Not just at school, but everywhere." "I'm safe," Emma responded automatically. "I'm glad to hear that. You know, sometimes when people we love are hurting inside, they can accidentally hurt others outside. That doesn't make it okay." Emma's hand trembled slightly, creating a jagged line across her perfect forest. "I have to go back to class," she whispered. "Of course," Miss Donovan said, making no move to stop her. "But Emma, my door is always open, and there's something important I want you to know. If someone is hurting you, it's never your fault, no matter what they might say." Emma gathered her things, careful to keep her sleeve pulled down. As she reached for her backpack, a small white card appeared in Miss Donovan's hand. "This has my phone number, if you ever need to talk, any time, day or night." Emma hesitated, then took the card, slipping it into her pocket. She didn't say thank you, she didn't say anything, but for a brief moment her eyes met Miss Donovan's directly. a moment of connection before the walls went back up. Outside the office, Emma touched the card in her pocket like a talisman. No one had ever given her a phone number before. No one had ever suggested that what happened at home might not be her fault. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Emma merged into the river of students, once again invisible, her silent pain hidden beneath a faded purple cardigan. Sarah Walker had been teaching second grade at Oak Ridge Elementary for 15 years, long enough to recognize the signs of a troubled child. Emma Reynolds had displayed those signs from her first day, the flinching at sudden movements, the hypervigilance, the desperate eagerness to please paired with a paradoxical reluctance to draw attention. Sarah organized math manipulatives as her students worked quietly on their addition worksheets. Her gaze drifted to Emma, hunched over her desk in the back corner, left hand curled protectively around her paper, as if someone might snatch it away. Unlike most children who attacked worksheets with enthusiastic, if messy, energy, Emma worked with painstaking precision, erasing even the slightest imperfections. The morning following Emma's lunch with Patricia Donovan, Sarah had received an email requesting she document any concerning observations. No details provided, but Sarah understood the protocol. Since then, she'd been watching more closely, noting patterns in a small notebook she kept in her desk. Emma arrived precisely 7 minutes before the first bell each morning, never participating in the playground socializing that typically preceded school. Her mother, a sharp-featured woman who wore expensive perfume and never quite made eye contact, dropped her off with the same instructions every day. Be good. Don't cause problems. The classroom door opened, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. Patricia stood in the doorway, gesturing quietly for attention. "Class, please continue working. I need to speak with Miss Donovan for a moment," Sarah announced, joining the counselor in the hallway. "How's our girl today?" Patricia asked, her voice low. Sarah sighed. "Fell asleep during silent reading again. When I gently woke her, she practically jumped out of her skin, apologizing over and over." She hesitated, then added, "There's something else. During PE yesterday, I noticed more marks on her shoulder blade when her shirt shifted during stretches." Patricia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes darkened, similar to what I saw. Circular, distinct, some older, yellowish, some fresher. Sarah crossed her arms, suddenly cold despite the hallway's stuffiness. "And she's been hoarding food. I found granola bars and apple slices wrapped in napkins in her desk. When I asked about it, she said she was saving them for science experiments." "Classic food insecurity response," Patricia murmured. "Has her mother been in for your getting-to-know-you conferences yet?" "Rescheduled twice. We're supposedly meeting tomorrow after school." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "I've left 2 messages for the family this week. No response yet." Inside the classroom, a small commotion erupted. Both women turned to see Jason Russell, standing over Emma's desk, holding her paper aloft. "Look," he was saying loudly, "Emma made the same mistake 3 times. Miss Perfect isn't so perfect." Before Sarah could intervene, Emma reacted with startling vehemence, lunging for the paper with a strangled cry. In the scuffle, she knocked over her water bottle, sending liquid cascading across her desk and onto the floor. The classroom fell silent. Emma stood frozen, eyes wide with terror, staring at the spreading puddle. "It's just water," Sarah said, already moving toward the spill. "Accidents happen, Emma, no big deal." But Emma was backing away, shaking her head. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice rising with each repetition. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." "Emma, sweetheart, it's okay." Sarah reached gently for the girl's shoulder, but Emma flinched so violently she bumped into the bookshelf behind her, sending several books tumbling to the floor. This additional chaos seemed to push her over some internal edge. Emma slid down against the wall, drawing her knees to her chest, her breathing coming in short, desperate gasps. While the other students watched in bewildered silence, Patricia knelt beside Emma, careful not to touch her. "Emma, you're safe here," she said firmly. "No one is angry. You're having a panic attack, but you're going to be okay. Can you look at me? That's it. Now let's breathe together." Gradually, Emma's breathing steadied, though her eyes remained filled with lingering terror. "Miss Walker, perhaps Emma could help me organize some new books in my office," Patricia suggested, providing an escape route with dignity preserved. Sarah nodded, addressing the class. "Jason, please clean up the water. Everyone else, back to your worksheets." As Patricia led Emma from the room, Sarah met her colleague's eyes over the child's head. The concern they'd been harboring individually had just crystallized into something more urgent, something that demanded action. The parent-teacher conference room at Oak Ridge Elementary was deliberately designed to feel welcoming. Warm beige, walls adorned with student artwork, comfortable adult-sized chairs instead of the tiny classroom seats, and a round table that avoided the confrontational feel of sitting across a desk. Despite these touches, the tension in the room was palpable as Patricia Donovan and Sarah Walker waited for the Reynolds family. "Her mother confirmed twice today," Sarah said, straightening a stack of Emma's assignments for the third time. "But I'm still not convinced she'll show." Patricia nodded, checking her watch. 10 minutes past the scheduled time. She was about to suggest they might need to reschedule when the door swung open. Vivian Reynolds entered like a crisp autumn wind. Elegant, in a tailored suit that spoke of money, her blonde hair pulled into a flawless chignon. Behind her stood a man Patricia assumed was Emma's father, though she hadn't seen him at drop-offs or pickups. Tall and broad-shouldered with salt and pepper hair, he had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "I apologize for our tardiness," Vivian said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Robert had a last-minute conference call that couldn't be rescheduled." "We understand completely," Patricia replied, gesturing toward the empty chairs. "We appreciate you both making the time." As they settled, Patricia noted the careful distance Vivian maintained from her husband, the slight stiffness in her movements as she placed her designer handbag beside her chair. "I'm Patricia Donovan, the school counselor. I've had a few conversations with Emma since she joined us. And I'm sure you found her to be bright and well-adjusted," Vivian interjected smoothly. "Emma has always been an excellent student despite our frequent relocations." "Yes, about those relocations," Sarah said. "Emma's records show 3 schools in the past 2 years. That's quite a lot of transition for a 7-year-old. Robert Reynolds cleared his throat. "My work requires us to move periodically. I'm in financial consulting, handling restructuring for companies in crisis. We go where the work is." "And how is Emma adapting to these changes?" Patricia asked, keeping her tone conversational. "Children are remarkably resilient," Vivian replied with practiced ease. "Emma understands this is simply our family's reality." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "Emma is indeed resilient and quite bright. Her academic performance is stellar, considering the disruptions." She paused, shifting toward the more difficult topics. "We've noticed, however, that she struggles with social interactions and appears chronically fatigued." A flicker of something, irritation, concern, crossed Vivian's features before her polished facade returned. "Emma has always been a sensitive child. She tires easily and has trouble sleeping in new environments. She falls asleep in class almost daily," Sarah added gently, "and when startled awake, she appears disoriented and frightened." Robert's posture stiffened. "What exactly are you implying, Ms. Walker?" "We're not implying anything, Mr. Reynolds," Patricia interjected smoothly. "We're sharing observations so we can work together to support Emma." Vivian's hand moved to adjust her silk scarf, a nervous gesture at odds with her composed demeanor. Emma has a medical condition, von Willebrand disease. It's a mild blood disorder that causes easy bruising and fatigue. We've provided the school nurse with documentation. Patricia made a mental note to check these records. Thank you for sharing that. It helps explain some of our observations. What observations? Robert's voice carried a warning edge. Patricia met his gaze directly. Emma has what appear to be multiple bruises on her arms and back. Given her medical condition, we wanted to ensure we're responding appropriately if injuries occur at school. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Those marks are from her condition, Vivian stated flatly. As her medical records clearly indicate, we monitor her health closely. Robert glanced at his watch. If there are no concerns about Emma's academic performance, we should conclude this meeting. We have another appointment. As they stood to leave, Patricia tried once more. We're truly just trying to support Emma. If there's anything happening at home that might explain her anxiety, changes in routine, family stress, it would help us understand how to make school feel safer for her. Our home life is not the issue, Robert said, his tone final. Perhaps the school should focus on creating a less stressful environment instead of questioning our parenting. After they departed, Sarah and Patricia sat in weighted silence. Von Willebrand disease doesn't cause perfectly circular bruises in clusters, Patricia finally said. No, Sarah agreed quietly. It doesn't. We need to document everything, and I'm calling CPS first thing tomorrow. That reaction wasn't just defensive, it was practiced. Sarah nodded, gathering Emma's assignments with hands that trembled slightly. Did you notice how Vivian kept checking Robert's expression before answering? And the way she adjusted her scarf when we mentioned the bruises? I did, Patricia confirmed, and I'm increasingly concerned that Emma isn't the only one in that house who's afraid. The Reynolds home stood apart from its neighbors, not just in physical distance, but in character. While the other houses on Maple Avenue displayed children's bikes on front lawns or seasonal wreaths on doors, the Reynolds colonial revival remained pristine and impersonal, like a model home waiting for real owners to arrive. Patricia Donovan parked her Subaru across the street, where June Martinez from Child Protective Services was already waiting. The call Patricia had made the day after meeting Emma's parents had set the standard 48-hour response clock ticking. I was hoping to catch them off guard, June explained as Patricia approached. But no one answered my knock. I was about to leave a notice when I saw you arriving. Mrs. Reynolds mentioned a standing Thursday appointment for Emma. Piano lessons, I believe, Patricia said, checking her watch. They should be home within the hour. June nodded, her experienced eyes scanning the property. Perfect lawn, no toys, windows spotless. Either they have a full-time housekeeper or someone in that family is working overtime to maintain. Appearances. They settled in to wait, discussing the case details in low voices. Patricia shared her observations of Emma, the bruises, the food hoarding, the panic attacks, while June took careful notes, occasionally glancing toward the house as if it might reveal its secrets under sustained scrutiny. 40 minutes later, a silver Mercedes SUV turned into the driveway. Vivian Reynolds emerged first, her posture rigid as she opened the rear door for Emma. The child stepped out clutching a music book, her movements cautious and measured. June and Patricia approached as Vivian was unlocking the front door. Emma noticed them first, her small body tensing visibly. "Mrs. Reynolds!" June called, her tone professionally neutral as she held up her identification. "I'm June Martinez from Child Protective Services. This is a routine follow-up to some concerns raised by Emma's school. Vivian's composure faltered momentarily before her social mask slid back into place. "This is highly inappropriate. My husband handles all legal matters. He'll be home in an hour. You can return then." "I'm afraid that's not how this works," June replied evenly. "When concerns involve a child's welfare, we're required to conduct timely assessments." Emma stood frozen on the porch steps, her eyes darting between the adults. "Emma, why don't you show Ms. Donovan your room while I speak with Ms. Martinez?" Vivian suggested with forced brightness. "You can show her your new books." Patricia recognized the tactic, separate the parties, control the narrative, but she also saw an opportunity to observe Emma's living environment. She offered the child a reassuring smile. "I'd love to see your books, if you're comfortable showing me." Inside, the home's interior matched its exterior. Expensively furnished, but oddly impersonal. No family photos adorned the walls, no magnets. Cluttered the refrigerator. Everything was coordinated, catalogued perfect, and strangely untouched. Emma led Patricia upstairs with the careful steps of someone trying to be invisible. Her bedroom contrasted sharply with the rest of the house, smaller than Patricia had expected, with plain white walls and minimal furniture. A twin bed with a grey comforter, a small desk, a bookshelf containing neatly arranged texts that seemed too advanced for a 7-year-old. "These are my books," Emma said softly, gesturing toward the shelf. Patricia noticed what was missing: stuffed animals, artwork, the cheerful clutter of childhood. The room felt more like a guest space than a child sanctuary. "It's very neat in here," Patricia observed gently. "Mom says messes make her nervous," Emma explained, perching on the edge of her bed. "I'm good at being tidy." Patricia nodded, noticing a slight discoloration on the wall beside the closet. Moving closer, she realized it was a series of small indents partially covered with fresh paint. "Did you recently redecorate?" she asked casually. Emma's eyes flicked to the spot, then quickly away. "Dad fixed it last weekend. It was an accident." "What kind of accident?" Before Emma could answer, Vivian appeared in the doorway. "Emma, please go downstairs and get your homework started. Ms. Martinez would like to see your completed assignments." As Emma slipped past her mother, Patricia noticed the slight flinch when Vivian's hand brushed her shoulder, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to trained eyes. "This tour is unnecessary," Vivian said once Emma was out of earshot. "As you can see, Emma has everything she needs." Patricia met her gaze steadily. "Mrs. Reynolds, a child needs more than material comforts to thrive. Are you questioning my parenting?" Vivian's voice remained controlled, but a vein at her temple pulsed visibly. "I'm concerned about unexplained injuries and behavioral symptoms consistent with trauma." Something shifted in Vivian's expression, fear briefly overtaking indignation before both were subsumed by a practiced neutrality. "My daughter has a medical condition, as we've explained, and now I must ask you both to leave. My husband will. Contact your supervisors tomorrow." Downstairs, June had completed her preliminary assessment, having seen enough to justify ongoing monitoring. As they left, Patricia glanced back at the house. Emma stood at an upstairs window, a small sentinel, watching their departure with solemn eyes. Elaine Mercer had been Oak Ridge Elementary's nurse for 22 years, long enough to differentiate between a child's genuine stomachache and an invented one to avoid a math test. She'd bandaged countless scrapes, dispensed thousands of ice packs, and documented every student injury with meticulous care. Her small office, with its vinyl cot and antiseptic smell, had become a refuge for children needing a moment of quiet as much as medical attention. When Patricia Donovan called to request her professional assessment of Emma Reynolds, Elaine knew to clear her schedule. Patricia didn't make such requests lightly. "The parents claim von Willebrand disease," Patricia explained as they waited for Emma to arrive. "I've checked her medical records. The documentation exists, but something feels off. Elaine nodded, pulling up Emma's file on her computer. The forms were transferred from her previous school, signed by a Dr. Lowell in Cincinnati. She frowned. No follow-up care plan, though. Most blood disorders require regular monitoring. A soft knock interrupted them. Sarah Walker stood in the doorway with Emma, who clutched her purple cardigan around her like armor. "Emma, you remember Nurse Mercer?" Sarah said gently. "She'd like to check your height and weight today, just like she does for all students." Emma nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes fixed on the tiled floor. "Thank you, Miss Walker," Elaine said warmly. "Emma and I will be just fine." After Sarah departed, Elaine gestured toward the scale. "Hop up here, sweetheart. This will only take a minute." Emma complied silently, slipping off her shoes with practiced efficiency. Elaine noted her weight, considerably below average for her age, before moving on to height measurements and a vision screening. She maintained a gentle stream of conversation, carefully observing Emma's movements and responses. "Your file mentions you have von Willebrand disease," Elaine said casually as she checked Emma's temperature. "Do you know what type?" Emma hesitated. "The kind that makes me bruise." "Does it cause you other problems? Nosebleeds? Bleeding? Gums when you brush your teeth?" Emma shook her head. "Just bruises and being tired sometimes." Elaine nodded, making notes on her tablet. "I'd like to check your blood pressure now, okay? This cuff will squeeze your arm a little bit." As she wrapped the pediatric cuff around Emma's thin arm, Elaine noticed fresh bruising near her wrist, partially concealed by her cardigan sleeve. She completed the blood pressure reading before addressing it. "I notice you have some bruises on your arm," she said matter-of-factly. "May I take a closer look? It's important for me to know if your condition is causing new symptoms." Emma's face remained expressionless, but her pulse, still beneath Elaine's fingertips, quickened noticeably. After a long moment, she gave a small nod. With gentle hands, Elaine pushed up the sleeve of Emma's cardigan. The bruising was extensive, multiple overlapping marks in various stages of healing. Most disturbing were the distinct circular patterns, some clearly showing teeth impressions. "Do these hurt?" Elaine asked, keeping her voice neutral despite the anger building inside her. "Only when they're new," Emma whispered. "And how do you get these bruises, Emma?" Emma's rehearsed answer came immediately. "My blood doesn't work right. I bump into things." "I see, and what about these marks on your back?" "The ones Miss Walker noticed during PE." Elaine kept her tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. Emma's shoulders hunched forward. "Same thing. May I check those too, just to make sure they're healing properly?" After another prolonged hesitation, Emma turned and lifted the back of her shirt just enough to reveal her lower back. Elaine struggled to maintain her professional demeanor. The bruising here was even more pronounced. Bite marks interspersed with what appeared to be finger-shaped bruises, all in various stages of healing. "Thank you for being so brave," Elaine said, helping Emma readjust her clothing. "Just one more thing. Do you remember when you got these bruises?" Emma's eyes darted toward the door. "At night, mostly," she finally admitted. "When I'm bad." "What makes you bad, Emma?" "Making noise, asking questions, forgetting rules." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Sometimes I don't even know what I did wrong." Elaine's heart constricted. She'd seen abuse cases before, but something about Emma's detached recitation made this particularly harrowing. "Emma, these aren't the kind of bruises that come from a blood condition or from bumping into things," she said gently. "I think you know that." Something shifted in Emma's expression, a flicker of relief quickly subsumed by fear. "My mom says no one will believe me anyway." "I believe you," Elaine said firmly, "and so does Ms. Donovan and Ms. Walker and Principal Abernathy. We all believe you." Emma studied Elaine's face, searching for deception and finding none. A single tear escaped, tracking silently down her cheek. "I need to document these injuries," Elaine explained softly, "to help keep you safe. Is that okay?" After a long moment, Emma nodded, a tiny movement containing monumental courage. Emma woke, screaming, her nightgown damp with sweat, phantom teeth still sinking into her flesh. For a terrifying moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling came into focus, a constellation she'd arranged herself, and reality returned. The Petersons' guest room. Safety. The door creaked open, spilling hallway light across the hardwood floor. Elizabeth Peterson appeared, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, eyes soft with concern. "Another bad dream, sweetheart?" she asked, approaching slowly as she'd been instructed. No sudden movements, no touching without permission. Emma nodded, drawing her knees to her chest. 3 nights she'd been here, in this temporary foster placement, and each night the same nightmare had returned. Dark shapes, muffled voices, and pain that felt too real to be a dream. "Would you like some warm milk?" Elizabeth offered. "Tom's already in the kitchen, making himself a midnight snack." "No, thank you," Emma whispered, then added hastily, "but I'm not being ungrateful." Elizabeth's smile held a sadness that wrinkled the corners of her eyes. "You don't need to explain, honey. There's no wrong answer." This concept remained foreign to Emma, a world without wrong answers, without punishments lurking behind incorrect responses. The Petersons never raised their voices. They asked before hugging her. They seemed genuinely interested in her opinions. It was disorienting. "Can I sit with you for a bit?" Elizabeth asked. After Emma's cautious nod, she settled on the edge of the bed, leaving deliberate space between them. "When I was a young girl," Elizabeth began, smoothing the quilt with weathered hands, "I had terrible nightmares. I would dream about drowning, water filling my lungs while something held me under." Emma's eyes widened. "Did they ever stop?" "They did, but first I had to talk about the scary things that were happening to me. Bringing secrets into the light takes away some of their power." The room fell silent, except for the gentle tick of the bedside clock. Emma twisted the hem of her nightgown, a battle visibly waging within her. "Ms. Donovan says the same thing," she finally murmured. "About secrets. She's a wise woman." Emma's fingers traced the faded bruises on her arm, most now yellowish-green, as they healed. "If I tell, what happens to my mom and dad?" The question carried the weight of adult concerns on a child's shoulders. Elizabeth considered her words carefully. "That depends on what you tell and what the investigation finds. But Emma, that's not your responsibility. Your only job is to be honest about what happened to you." "But what if I can't remember everything?" Anxiety edged Emma's voice. "Sometimes things are fuzzy, especially from before we moved here." "That's completely normal," Elizabeth assured her. "Our minds sometimes protect us by blurring the hardest memories." Emma seemed to retreat inward, her small face pinched with concentration. "I remember the closet most. When Dad was angry, Mum would put me in there so he wouldn't see me. She said it was safer." Elizabeth maintained her composed expression despite the horror rising within her. "The closet in your bedroom?" Emma shook her head. "The one under the stairs. It locks from the outside." The implications settled heavily between them. Elizabeth waited, allowing Emma the space to continue if she chose. "Sometimes I'd be in there a long time," Emma whispered, "with no light, and if I made noise." Her hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, where the worst of the bite marks had been photographed by Nurse Mercer. "Your mother did that to you?" Elizabeth asked gently, clarifying what Patricia had suspected but hadn't confirmed. Emma nodded, tears welling. "She said it was to teach me to be quiet, so Dad wouldn't get angry and hurt us both." "Did your father hurt you too?" "Not like Mom. He just..." Emma struggled, searching for words beyond her years. He would grab really hard and sometimes throw things. He mostly hurt Mom, I think. I heard her crying at night. Elizabeth absorbed this information, recognizing the complex dynamics at play, a household where abuse cascaded downward, where Emma's mother was both victim and perpetrator. "Emma, you're being incredibly brave telling me this," she said softly. "Am I bad for telling?" Emma's voice was barely audible. "Mom says family business stays inside the family." "No, sweetheart, you're not bad. You're protecting yourself, which is what every child deserves." Emma considered this, her small fingers plucking at the blanket. "I don't want to go home," she admitted, the words rushing out, as if she feared saying them aloud. "Is that bad too?" "That's the most honest thing in the world," Elizabeth assured her. "And I promise you, everyone working on your case is doing everything possible to make sure you don't have to." For the first time since arriving at the Petersons, Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if setting down a burden she'd carried too long. When she eventually drifted back to sleep, her face looked younger somehow, unburdened by secrets finally spoken aloud. June Martinez spread the files across the conference table at Child Protective Services, creating a timeline of the Reynolds family's movements. Patricia Donovan leaned forward, studying the pattern that emerged. Cincinnati, Ohio, Belleville, Illinois, Rochester, New York, and now Oak Ridge, Wisconsin, all within 2 years. 4 cities in 26 months, June observed, tapping a red-nailed finger on the map she'd marked. Each time, they stayed just long enough to establish themselves professionally before something triggered another move. Patricia nodded, the pieces fitting together with disturbing precision, and each relocation followed shortly after a school or medical professional expressed concern about Emma. After Emma's disclosure to Elizabeth Peterson 3 nights ago, the investigation had accelerated. June had obtained court orders for Emma's complete records from previous schools and medical facilities, revealing a disturbing pattern that the Reynolds had carefully concealed. In Cincinnati, June continued, opening the thickest folder, Emma's kindergarten teacher noted unusual bruising and extreme anxiety. When questioned, the parents produced documentation of von Willebrand disease from this doctor. She slid across a medical form. Dr. Lowell, allegedly a hematologist. "Allegedly?" Patricia questioned. "I contacted the Cincinnati Medical Board. No Dr. James Lowell with these credentials exists. The address on the letterhead belongs to a vacant office building." Patricia exhaled slowly, anger simmering beneath her professional demeanor. So the entire medical condition was fabricated. It appears so. By the time Cincinnati CPS scheduled a home visit, the family had already relocated to Belleville, citing Robert's work assignment. June opened the next folder. In Belleville, a school counselor documented Emma's concerning behaviors, similar to what you observed. Food hoarding, sleep disturbances, hypervigilance. When the counselor scheduled a parent meeting, Vivian arrived alone, claiming Robert was traveling. The next day, Emma was withdrawn from school. Reason given: family relocation. The pattern repeated in Rochester. Initial concerns raised, medical documentation provided, followed by abrupt departure before a thorough investigation could occur. "They've been one step ahead of the system," Patricia murmured, the weight of this realization settling heavily, using Robert's consulting work as cover for strategic retreats whenever someone gets too close. Classic evasion tactics, June agreed, but they made mistakes this time. Emma's disclosure to Mrs. Peterson gives us first-hand testimony and the medical documentation. She pulled out Nurse Mercer's detailed report and photographs. These bite marks are forensically significant. Human dentition is as unique as fingerprints. A knock interrupted them. Detective Carla Reyes from Special Victims entered, carrying a thick manila envelope. The search warrant was executed this Sue. "Morning," she announced, laying crime scene photographs on the table. "We found the closet under the stairs, exactly as Emma described it. Interior lock, no light source. We also found these." The photographs showed a meticulously organized home office. On a hidden shelf behind Robert's desk, 3 passports and $17,000 in cash. They were preparing to run again, Patricia realized. "They won't get the chance," Detective Reyes assured her. "Robert Reynolds was arrested at his office an hour ago. Vivian was taken into custody at home." June flipped through the additional evidence photos. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to an image of a leather-bound book. "Vivian's journal," Reyes explained. "It contains detailed documentation of the abuse, dates, triggers, punishments. Most disturbing is her justification system. She repeatedly writes that she's disciplining Emma properly so Robert won't have to do worse." Patricia closed her eyes briefly, the familiar pattern of family violence emerging with heartbreaking clarity. She convinced herself she was protecting Emma by controlling the abuse, while simultaneously ensuring Emma wouldn't report either of them, June added. She positioned herself as the lesser evil, the protector who only hurt Emma to prevent worse harm. "The journal will be crucial evidence," Reyes noted, "along with this." She produced a final photograph, a small digital recorder found taped beneath Emma's bed. Vivian was recording Emma at night, apparently to monitor whether she cried or spoke in her sleep. The audio includes incidents of abuse. The 3 women fell silent, each processing the calculated cruelty revealed in their evidence. "What happens to Emma now?" Patricia finally asked. "The emergency placement with the Petersons has been extended," June replied. "They've expressed interest in becoming her long-term foster parents. Emma seems to be forming an attachment to them. And after everything, that's what matters most," Patricia said quietly, "that she finally has a safe place to heal." Detective Reyes gathered her materials. "The preliminary hearing is Monday. With this evidence, both parents will likely remain in custody throughout the trial." "Good," Patricia said with uncharacteristic firmness. "Emma needs to know they can't reach her anymore, that this relocation to the Petersons will be her last for a very long time." The conference room at the Child Protective Services office had seen countless cases, its walls absorbing years of heartbreak and occasional triumph. Today, it held an interdisciplinary team, assembled for Emma's case review. June Martinez, Patricia Donovan, Detective Reyes, District Attorney Sophia Chen, and Dr. Lena Whitman, the child psychologist who had conducted Emma's forensic interview. "Let's start with the interview findings," June suggested, her case file open before her. "Dr. Whitman?" The psychologist adjusted her glasses, her gentle demeanor belying her expertise in trauma assessment. "Emma demonstrates significant signs of complex trauma consistent with chronic abuse. During our 3 sessions, she disclosed multiple instances of physical abuse, primarily by her mother." Dr. Whitman played a brief recording from the interview room, Emma's small voice filling the space. "Mom said biting doesn't leave bruises. If that lasts long, she did it where people can't see, except sometimes she forgot and did my arms." Patricia winced, recalling the mark she'd first noticed in the cafeteria, a chance observation that had set everything in motion. Emma also described emotional abuse and neglect from both parents, Dr. Whitman continued. Robert Reynolds used fear and intimidation rather than direct physical violence against Emma, though she witnessed him assaulting her mother on multiple occasions. "Classic batterer behavior," Detective Reyes noted. "Control the household through fear. Let the other parent serve as buffer and scapegoat." June nodded. "The dynamic matches what we've found in Vivian's journal. She writes about taking care of discipline so Robert wouldn't have to involve himself. She flipped through her notes. Her entries suggest she genuinely believed she was protecting Emma by controlling the abuse herself. A twisted logic, DHN observed, but one we often see in domestic violence cases. The victim becomes a participant to maintain some illusion of control. That doesn't excuse what she did to her daughter, Patricia said, more sharply than she'd intended. No, it doesn't, June agreed, but it helps us understand the household dynamics. Both parents will face charges, but they'll likely be differentiated based on role and intent. Dr. Whitman cleared her throat. There's another aspect of Emma's trauma we need to address. The frequent relocations served a dual purpose, not just evading investigation, but also preventing Emma from forming support networks. She was deliberately isolated, which explains her difficulty connecting with peers, Patricia realized. She's never been allowed to develop those skills. Exactly, Dr. Whitman confirmed. Each time she might have formed a relationship with a teacher or counselor who could help her, the family moved. She learned that attachment leads to loss. June turned to the evidence collected during the home search. The physical evidence corroborates Emma's account. The closet under the stairs had scratch marks on the inside of the door and a small collection of items Emma apparently kept there. A flashlight, some snack wrappers, a torn picture book. Survival supplies, Patricia murmured. We also found controlled substances in Vivian's bathroom, Detective Reyes added. Prescription anxiety medications under different names. We're investigating whether she was doctor shopping across state lines. Dia Chen made notes, her expression focused. That adds potential drug charges. What about Robert's financials? His consulting business appears legitimate, June replied, but we've discovered a pattern of workplace issues. He was asked to leave his position in Cincinnati after conflicts with colleagues. Similar situation in Rochester. He presents well initially, but can't maintain professional relationships once his control issues surface. Hence the frequent moves, Dr. Whitman said. Not just evading CPS, but also job failures. June nodded. The school records show equal sophistication. Emma's academic files were meticulously maintained and transferred, while any documentation of concerns was mysteriously lost during transitions. They knew exactly how to work the system, Patricia observed. Until now, June replied. The hearing for temporary custody is tomorrow. Given the evidence, the court will almost certainly maintain Emma's placement with the Petersons while the criminal case proceeds. And Emma's current condition, Dr. Whitman asked. Patricia shared what she knew from her daily visits. She's showing small improvements, sleeping better, though still having nightmares. The Petersons report she's started asking questions, wanting to know what happens next, how long she can stay with them. That's significant, Dr. Whitman noted. She's engaging with her future rather than just surviving the present. There's one more thing, June said, pulling a document from her file. Emma's maternal grandmother has come forward. Vivian apparently cut contact with her family years ago, but the grandmother saw the case on local news and contacted us. She lives about an hour away and is requesting visitation. Do we know anything about her? Patricia asked. Initial background check is clean. She seems genuinely concerned about Emma. Another potential support person, Dr. Whitman observed. If appropriate, reconnecting Emma with extended family could be invaluable for her recovery. As the meeting concluded, June gathered her files, her expression both weary and determined. We've built a solid case. Now we need to ensure Emma receives every resource available for healing. And ensure this cycle ends with her, Patricia added quietly. Rain tapped against the window of Patricia's office, creating a gentle rhythm, as Emma carefully arranged colored pencils in rainbow order. 1 month had passed since the emergency removal, 3 weeks since the court had granted continued placement with the Petersons. Slowly, incrementally, changes were emerging in the little girl who had once been afraid of her own shadow. "I made something for Mrs. Peterson," Emma said, sliding a folded paper across the small table. "But I'm not sure if it's good enough." Patricia opened it to find a meticulously drawn house with 4 figures standing outside. 2 taller ones she assumed were the Petersons, a small figure with brown hair that was clearly Emma, and a fluffy shape that must be the Petersons' elderly golden retriever, Buddy. "This is beautiful, Emma. I think Mrs. Peterson will treasure it." Emma fidgeted with a red pencil. "It's to say thank you for letting me stay, for—" She hesitated, searching for words, "for not being mean when I make mistakes." Patricia noted the precision in the drawing, how the house included exact details, like the bird feeder in the front yard and the pattern of the Petersons' welcome mat. Emma's art had evolved from the dark, confined spaces she used to draw to open, detailed scenes full of careful observation. "It's a wonderful way to express gratitude," Patricia assured her. "How have you been feeling at the Petersons lately?" Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all questions, as if searching for the correct answer. A habit Patricia was gently trying to help her unlearn. "Better, I think. I'm not scared all the time anymore. Just sometimes." "What makes you scared now?" Emma's pencil stilled. "When Mr. Peterson talks loud to the TV during baseball games, but he noticed it scared me, and now he tells me before the game starts that he might get excited, so I can be ready." She paused. "And he never gets mad if I go to my room when it's too loud." Patricia smiled at this evidence of the Petersons' sensitivity to Emma's needs. "It sounds like they're very understanding. They have rules, but they tell me what they are. They don't change them suddenly." Emma's voice held wonder at this novel concept. "And when I forget, they just remind me they don't—" She stopped abruptly. "They don't hurt you," Patricia finished gently, "because no one should ever hurt a child, no matter what they've done." Emma nodded slowly, not entirely, convinced but wanting to believe. "Ms. Donovan, will I have to see my mom and dad in court?" June explained about the trial, but she didn't say if I have to be there. "No, you won't have to be in the same room with them," Patricia assured her. "Dr. Whitman's interviews were recorded exactly so you wouldn't have to repeat your story. In court, there might be a time when a judge wants to speak with you privately, but that would be in a special room, not a courtroom." Relief visibly washed over Emma. She returned to her drawing, adding clouds to the sky. "I met my grandmother yesterday," she said after a few minutes, her tone carefully neutral. This was news to Patricia. "Grandmother Ellis came to the Petersons?" Emma nodded. "She brought pictures of my mom when she was little, and a quilt she made for me." She glanced up tentatively. "She said she didn't know about me for a long time, that my mom and dad didn't let her visit." "How did you feel about meeting her?" Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "Weird at first, but nice after. She didn't try to hug me right away. She asked if it was okay, and she knew how to play Uno." A smile flickered across her face. "She let me win, but she tried to hide it." Patricia made a mental note to follow up with June about this visit. If Emma's grandmother could provide a healthy family connection, it could be tremendously valuable for her long-term healing. "Ms. Donovan?" Emma's voice had dropped to a near whisper. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. Sometimes I miss my mom." Shame clouded her features. "Even after everything. Is that bad?" Patricia moved from her chair to kneel beside Emma, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "That's not bad at all, Emma. It's completely normal. You can miss someone and still understand that they hurt you. Feelings are complicated that way." Emma absorbed this, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. "Will I stay with the Petersons forever?" "I don't know for certain," Patricia answered honestly. "But I promise you'll never go back to a situation where you're hurt or afraid. The judge will make sure of that, and so will I." Emma nodded, returning to her drawing. She added a sun peeking from behind the clouds, its rays extending down to touch the figures below. "I'm putting in the sun," she explained, "because Mrs. Peterson says after rain, the sun always comes back eventually." She looked up at Patricia, a fragile hope in her eyes. "I think maybe she's right." "I think she is too," Patricia agreed softly, witnessing the tentative emergence of trust in a child who had every reason never to trust again. The evidence box arrived at District Attorney Sophia Chen's office on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a court clerk with clipboard in hand. Inside, among the items seized from the Reynolds home, lay Vivian's leather-bound journal, the document that had initially broken the case wide open. Sophia had reviewed the journal's contents during preliminary hearings, but something about it continued to nag at her. She called June Martinez, requesting her presence for a more thorough examination. "What specifically concerns you?" June asked, as they spread the journal's contents across Sophia's conference table. "The timeline doesn't add up," Sophia replied, flipping through the meticulously dated entries. "Vivian documents Emma's disciplining with disturbing precision, but there's a 9-month gap 2 years ago." Then the entries resume with a different tone entirely. June leaned forward, studying the handwriting. "You're right. Before the gap, the entries are almost clinical. Dates, behaviors, corrections. Afterward, there's more emotion, more justification." "Almost as if she's trying to convince herself," Sophia noted. They worked methodically through the journal, creating a separate timeline alongside the family's known movements. Near the back, they discovered several pages that had been glued together. Carefully, using a letter opener, Sophia separated them. "These weren't in the initial evidence review," she murmured, scanning the hidden entries. "My God!" The concealed pages revealed a darker narrative than even they had anticipated. Vivian described Robert's escalating violence toward her following a miscarriage, the timing matching the 9-month journal gap. She wrote of hospitalization under a false name, of Robert's threats should she ever report him or leave. Most chillingly, she documented Robert's growing fixation on Emma. "He says she's not disciplined enough. Says my methods are too soft. I can't let him take over her punishment. I know what he's capable of." She was creating a record, June realized. Documentation she was too afraid to submit officially, but couldn't bring herself to destroy. And using it to justify her own abuse of Emma, Sophia added, convincing herself she was the lesser evil. As they continued examining the journal, Patricia Donovan arrived with another piece of the puzzle. Emma's school records from Cincinnati, which she'd finally obtained through a court order. Emma's kindergarten teacher noted something interesting, Patricia explained, laying the records beside the journal. During a lesson about community helpers, Emma became extremely upset when police officers were discussed. She told the teacher, "Police don't help, they make things worse." June cross-referenced the date with the journal. Here, Vivian writes about an incident where neighbors called police after hearing Robert's outburst, but when officers arrived, Emma was hiding in the closet and Vivian denied any problems. "Classic domestic violence dynamics," Sophia said. "The victim protects the abuser out of fear, and the child learns that outside help is unreliable." The three women worked through lunch, piecing together a complex family history that painted a more nuanced but no less disturbing picture. Robert emerged as the primary aggressor whose violence had created the toxic household. Vivian, originally his victim, had transformed into Emma's abuser, channeling her own trauma and fear into controlling her daughter. "This context matters for prosecution," Sophia noted, but it doesn't excuse what Vivian did to Emma. No, June agreed, but it helps explain why Emma sometimes still asks about her mother. Their relationship contained both terror and moments of protection, however warped that protection was. A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Reyes entered, carrying a sealed evidence bag. "We found another journal," she announced, placing it on the table. Hidden in a waterproof container in the house's crawl space. The handwriting matches. Vivian's, but this one dates back further, to before Emma was born. With gloved hands, Sophia opened the second journal. The earliest entries described Vivian's courtship with Robert, his charm, his ambition, his increasing possessiveness. She documented early warning signs she'd ignored, his isolation tactics, his temper, how he'd punish her with silence for perceived slights. Classic grooming pattern, June observed. By the time the serious abuse started, she was already trapped in the relationship dynamic. As they reached entries from Vivian's pregnancy, the tone shifted dramatically. She wrote of her determination to protect her unborn child, of plans to escape Robert's control. Then came Emma's birth, and with it, paralyzing fear. He held her today and said she looks just like me, said he'd make sure she grows up right, not weak like I am. I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. "She never had a chance to escape with an infant," Patricia said softly, "and over time she adapted to survive in the only way she knew how, by becoming what she feared." Detective Reyes nodded grimly. The most disturbing cycles of abuse are the ones where victims become perpetrators. Breaking that pattern requires resources Vivian clearly didn't have or couldn't access. "None of this changes the charges," Sophia reminded them, "but it does affect how we approach Emma's long-term healing. She needs to understand that what happened wasn't her fault, and that adults failed her, not the other way around." June gathered the journals carefully. These provide crucial context, but they're also evidence of premeditation. Vivian knew what she was doing was wrong enough to document as if building a case that might never be heard. "Until now," Patricia said quietly, thinking of the small girl who was finally learning to trust again. Until Emma found her voice. Margaret Ellis arrived at the Peterson home precisely at 3 o'clock, just as she had every Saturday for the past month. Her silver Buick contained the usual items: a canvas tote of library books selected for Emma's growing interests, ingredients for their weekly baking project, and a small gift wrapped in colorful paper. At 72, Margaret moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had weathered life's storms and emerged with quiet resilience. Elizabeth Peterson greeted her at the door. "She's been watching for your car since lunch," she confided with a smile. "Your visits have become the highlight of her week." Margaret's eyes crinkled warmly. "The feeling is mutual." From within the house came the patter of small feet, and Emma appeared in the hallway, her face brightening before she composed herself. Still not entirely comfortable with showing excitement, though improving each week. "Hello, grandmother," she said politely, the formality at odds with the anticipation in her eyes. "Hello, my dear," Margaret replied, lowering herself to Emma's eye level despite her arthritic knees. "I thought we might make snickerdoodles today. Would that be agreeable?" Emma nodded, carefully taking the grocery bag Margaret offered. This ritual, the baking, the stories Margaret shared of Emma's mother as a child, the gradual building of a relationship, had become sacred to them both. Later, as cinnamon-scented cookies cooled on racks, Emma and Margaret settled at the kitchen table with milk and the day's first sampling of their creation. Elizabeth had tactfully retreated to the garden, giving them privacy while remaining within earshot, a precaution still necessary given Emma's occasional panic attacks. "These are perfect," Margaret declared, breaking a warm cookie in half. "You have a natural talent for baking," Emma ducked her head at the praise, but couldn't hide her smile. Mom never let me help in the kitchen. She said I'd make a mess. Margaret's expression flickered briefly before settling back into gentleness. Well, the best baking always involves a bit of mess. It's part of the process. She reached into her tote bag and withdrew a flat, rectangular package wrapped in paper, decorated with hand-drawn flowers. I brought something special today. Emma accepted the gift carefully. Unlike most children who tear into presents, she unwrapped it methodically, preserving the paper. Inside lay a leather album, its cover embossed with Emma's family in elegant script. What is it? Emma asked, running her fingers over the lettering. Open it and see, Margaret encouraged. The first page held a photograph of a baby with a shock of dark hair, unmistakably Emma as an infant nestled in hospital blankets. Where did you get this? Emma whispered, transfixed. Vivian sent it to me when you were born, Margaret explained. Before. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Before your father decided they should cut contact with me. Emma turned the page to find more photographs, herself as a toddler on a swing, holding a stuffed rabbit, sitting on what appeared to be Margaret's lap at Christmas. I don't remember any of this, Emma said, confusion evident in her voice. You were very young, Margaret replied gently, just barely 2 when they stopped visiting, stopped sending pictures. Emma studied a photograph of herself with her mother, both smiling, Vivian looking younger and unburdened. She looks different here. She was different then, Margaret said softly. Your mother was always a sensitive child, perhaps too eager to please, but she was loving and kind before she met your father. Emma's fingers traced her mother's face in the photograph. What happened? Margaret sighed, the weight of years of worry evident in the sound. Robert happened. He changed her slowly at first, then more dramatically. When I expressed concerns, they stopped coming to visit. When I tried to check on them, they moved. Without telling me where. For years, I didn't know where you were or if you were safe. Is that why you never came to help us? The question held no accusation, only a child's need to understand. I tried, Emma. I hired private investigators, filed reports with social services, even drove to their last known address in Cincinnati. But your father was clever about covering their tracks. It wasn't until I saw the news about their arrest that I finally found you. Emma considered this, her brow furrowed in the expression of concentration that made her look older than her years. So, you didn't forget about me? Never. Not for a single day, Margaret assured her, emotion thickening. Her voice, I kept looking. I kept hoping. Emma turned another page in the album, finding blank spaces labeled with dates spanning the years of her absence. These are empty. Those are for new memories we'll make together, Margaret explained. If you want to. Emma nodded slowly, then with more certainty. I'd like that. She hesitated, then asked the question that clearly troubled her most. Grandmother, was my mom always? Did she always hurt children? Margaret's heart constricted. At the careful phrasing, not did she always hurt me, but a more generalized inquiry that distanced Emma from her own trauma. No, sweetheart. The Vivian I knew loved children and would never harm them. Something happened to change her, something terrible that twisted her understanding of love and protection. She reached across the table, not touching Emma, but offering her hand palm up in invitation. And none of it, not one moment, was your fault. After a long moment, Emma placed her small hand in her grandmother's, a gesture of trust, more eloquent than words. May I keep this? She asked, indicating the album. It's yours, Margaret confirmed. Your history, your future, and most importantly, proof that you were loved from the very beginning, even when I couldn't reach you. Emma closed the album carefully, hugging it to her chest. Outside, The afternoon sun illuminated dust motes, dancing in the air between them, tiny particles of possibility suspended in light. The preliminary hearing for Vivian Reynolds was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, the courtroom already buzzing with hushed conversations when Patricia Donovan slipped into a seat beside June Martinez. Unlike Robert's hearing the previous week, where he'd maintained a cold, detached demeanor, this proceeding carried an air of complicated grief. Emma's mother wasn't just a perpetrator. She existed in that grey area where victimhood and accountability collided. Vivian entered in county-issued clothing, her once polished appearance now stripped of artifice. Without designer clothes and careful makeup, she looked smaller, almost fragile. Her eyes scanned the gallery until they found Patricia lingering there with an unspoken question before moving on. "She's asked to speak with you," June whispered, leaning close. "After the hearing. Her attorney says she has something important to share about Emma." Patricia nodded, her professional instinct warring with protective anger toward the woman who had inflicted such calculated harm on a child. Before she could respond, the proceedings began. The prosecution presented a timeline of abuse, supporting evidence including the journals, medical reports, and expert testimony from Dr. Whitman. Throughout, Vivian sat motionless, her gaze fixed on her folded hands. When her attorney rose to speak, he presented a narrative of domestic terrorism, Robert's systematic breaking of Vivian's spirit, the isolation, the threats that kept her trapped in a cycle of violence that eventually spilled onto Emma. "My client doesn't deny her actions," the attorney concluded, "but context matters. She was both perpetrator and victim, making impossible choices in an environment of constant fear." The judge maintained an impassive expression, asking pointed questions about why Vivian hadn't sought help during multiple opportunities, medical appointments, school interactions, even routine errands without Robert present. "Your Honor," the attorney responded, "after years of conditioning, my client believed escape was impossible, that Robert would find them, that authorities wouldn't protect them, that she would lose Emma entirely." When the judge announced Vivian would remain in custody throughout trial proceedings, no one appeared surprised, least of all Vivian herself. Afterward, Patricia found herself in a small consultation room, waiting. When Vivian entered, escorted by a corrections officer, the silence between them expanded like a physical presence. "Thank you for coming," Vivian finally said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I'm here for Emma's sake," Patricia replied evenly. "June said you have information relevant to her well-being." Vivian nodded, her movements measured. "How is she?" "Healing," Patricia answered, offering nothing more. "What did you want to tell me?" Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "There are things Emma doesn't know, things I've never told anyone, about why I stayed, about what happened before Cincinnati." For the next 40 minutes, Vivian spoke without interruption, revealing the hidden architecture of their family nightmare. She described meeting Robert during her final year of nursing school, his charm, his prospects, how quickly he isolated her from friends and family. Her pregnancy had been unexpected, but initially welcome, until Robert's controlling behavior escalated. "The first time he hurt me badly, Emma was 3 months old," Vivian said, her voice flat with the emotional deadness of recounting trauma. "I tried to leave, packed our things while he was at work, called my mother for help." Patricia leaned forward slightly. "What happened?" "He found out. I don't know how. He was waiting when I returned from dropping Emma at daycare." Vivian's hand moved unconsciously to her collarbone. "He broke my clavicle, 2 ribs, said if I ever tried to leave again, he'd kill Emma, then me, then himself, said no one would find us for days." She described Robert's calculated manipulation, allowing her to work as a nurse, but monitoring her whereabouts constantly, checking her phone, isolating her from colleagues who might notice warning signs. "When Emma started school, I thought. Someone might see, might help, Vivian continued. That's when Robert devised the blood disorder story. He forced me to create the medical documentation using my nursing knowledge. Said if I didn't convince everyone, he'd show Emma what real discipline looked like. So you became the enforcer, Patricia stated, not a question, but an observation. Vivian nodded, tears finally breaking through. I told myself I was protecting her from worse, that my methods were controlled, calculated to leave minimal lasting damage while satisfying Robert's demand for discipline. You bit her, Patricia said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Repeatedly. You locked her in closets, terrorized her. Yes, Vivian didn't attempt justification. I became the monster I feared Robert would be, but there's something else Emma needs to know, something I've hidden even from myself until recently. She reached into her uniform pocket, withdrawing a folded paper. I've been working with a prison psychiatrist. Part of my treatment involves acknowledging the full truth, to myself and to Emma. This is my first step. Patricia accepted the sealed envelope, its weight somehow disproportionate to its size. It's a confession, Vivian explained, the complete, unvarnished truth about what happened and why. When Emma is ready, if she's ever ready, this might help her understand. Not excuse, not forgive. Just understand. As Patricia rose to leave, Vivian spoke once more, her voice barely audible. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But please tell Emma one thing from me. What's that? Tell her the person who hurt her wasn't the mother she should have had. Tell her that somewhere, buried beneath years of fear and broken choices, that mother still remembers who she was meant to be. The pediatric examination room at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital was deliberately cheerful, with murals of woodland creatures frolicking across mint-green walls. Dr. Kristen Harper reviewed Emma's chart one final time before entering, her brow furrowed in concentration. After 2 months of specialized care, something still didn't add up in Emma's medical profile. Emma sat on the examination table, legs dangling, while Elizabeth Peterson occupied the chair beside her. At Dr. Harper's entrance, Emma straightened, slightly, not fearfully, but with the attentiveness of a child who'd learned to read adults' expressions for signs of danger. Good morning, Emma, Dr. Harper greeted warmly. How are those vitamin supplements working? Any tummy troubles? Emma shook her head. They taste gross, but Mrs. Peterson puts them in smoothies, so it's not too bad. Clever solution, Dr. Harper smiled at Elizabeth before addressing Emma again. Your latest blood tests show improvement in your iron levels, but they're still lower than I'd like. Have you been having any unusual symptoms? Dizziness? Feeling extra tired? Sometimes I get really tired in the afternoon, Emma admitted, and my legs hurt at night sometimes. Dr. Harper made notes, then performed a standard examination, checking Emma's heart, lungs, reflexes. When she gently palpated the child's abdomen, she paused, pressing slightly more firmly near the spleen. Any tenderness here? She asked, watching Emma's face carefully. A little. Is something wrong? Just being thorough, Dr. Harper assured. Though her mind was already assembling puzzle pieces. Emma, would you mind waiting outside with the nurse for a moment? There's a new book in the waiting area I think you might enjoy. I'd like to talk with Mrs. Peterson briefly. Once Emma had been escorted out, Dr. Harper turned to Elizabeth. I'm concerned about some patterns I'm seeing. Emma's blood work shows persistent anemia that's not responding typically to iron supplementation. Combined with her fatigue, leg, a pain and the slight splenomegaly I just detected, I'd like to run additional tests. Elizabeth's hands twisted in her lap. What kind of tests? What are you looking for? I want to rule out several possibilities, including some we wouldn't normally screen for in a child Emma's age." Dr. Harper hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Has Emma mentioned anything about medications she might have been given regularly at home? Pills, liquids, injections?" Elizabeth considered this. Not specifically, but she did once mention that her mother gave her special medicine when she was too energetic. We assumed it was a way of controlling her behavior. Dr. Harper nodded, making another note. "I'd like to do a comprehensive toxicology screening and some specialized blood work. There's a condition I'm suspicious of, but I need more data before discussing it." After obtaining Elizabeth's consent, Dr. Harper ordered the tests. 3 days later, she called Patricia Donovan, requesting an urgent meeting with everyone involved. In Emma's care, the conference room at Child Protective Services filled quickly. Patricia, June Martinez, the Petersons, and Margaret Ellis all assembling with varying degrees of concern. Dr. Harper arrived last, carrying a thick file and a grave expression. "Thank you all for coming," she began without preamble. "I've confirmed something disturbing about Emma's medical condition. She's suffering from chronic heavy metal poisoning, specifically arsenic." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "Arsenic?" June repeated incredulously. "How is that possible?" "Deliberate administration over an extended period," Dr. Harper replied. "The toxin accumulates in tissues, particularly hair and nails. Analysis of Emma's hair sample shows varying concentrations consistent with long-term exposure, higher during periods of apparent deteriorating behavior, lower during transitions between schools." Patricia's mind raced to the implications. "You're suggesting Vivian was poisoning her?" "The evidence strongly indicates it," Dr. Harper confirmed. "The symptoms align perfectly: fatigue, anemia resistant to iron therapy, abdominal discomfort, and the neurological effects Emma's teachers noted: concentration difficulties, mood fluctuations, occasional confusion." Margaret Ellis pressed trembling fingers to her lips. "But why? Why would Vivian do this to her own child?" "It appears to be a case of factitious disorder imposed on another," Dr. Harper explained. "Formerly called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The perpetrator, usually a caregiver, deliberately makes someone ill to gain attention, sympathy, or control." June flipped through her case notes. The medical visits. Every time they relocated, Vivian established care with a new pediatrician. The fabricated blood disorder gave her a perfect cover for symptoms caused by the poisoning. And the frequent school transfers prevented any single doctor from seeing the pattern, Patricia added, the horrifying logic becoming clear. Each new physician only saw what Vivian wanted them to see: a sickly child with an attentive mother. Elizabeth Peterson, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "What does this mean for Emma's recovery?" "And with proper treatment, the prognosis is good," Dr. Harper assured them. "We'll begin chelation therapy immediately to remove the accumulated arsenic. Most children recover completely once exposure ends, though we'll monitor for any lasting neurological effects." "I've already notified the district attorney," June said. "This evidence significantly strengthens the case against Vivian." Patricia stared at the medical reports, a new understanding of Emma's ordeal crystallizing. The control wasn't just physical and emotional. Vivian literally poisoned Emma to maintain her dependency and justify her medical narrative. "And to ensure Emma would be too weak to effectively resist or escape," Dr. Harper added grimly. Margaret's shoulders slumped beneath this new weight. "I never imagined Vivian capable of such calculation." "The important thing now is Emma's treatment," Patricia reminded them, refocusing on the path forward. "How do we explain this to her?" Dr. Harper considered this carefully. "We tell her the truth, in age-appropriate terms, that she's been sick because of something her mother gave her, not because there's anything inherently wrong with her, Children are remarkably resilient when given honest explanations and consistent support. As the meeting concluded, Patricia lingered, studying Emma's photo in the file. The medical mystery solution had revealed yet another layer of betrayal, one that would need to be delicately integrated into Emma's healing journey. "We'll get her through this too," she murmured, a promise to herself as much as to Emma. The juvenile courtroom was smaller than Patricia had imagined, designed to be less intimidating than the formal criminal courts where Robert and Vivian Reynolds would eventually face justice. Warm wood paneling and comfortable chairs softened the institutional atmosphere, though nothing could fully ease the weight of decisions being made about a child's future. Emma wasn't present, a deliberate choice agreed upon by her therapist, legal advocate and Judge Eleanor Winters, who specialized in family court cases. Instead, Emma waited in a child-friendly room down the hall with a court-appointed supervisor, surrounded by books and art supplies, while the adults determined her fate. Patricia sat with June Martinez, the Petersons, and Margaret Ellis, all dressed in understated business attire out of respect for the proceedings. Across the aisle, Vivian's sister Claire had arrived unexpectedly from Florida, claiming family connection and expressing interest in Emma's placement. Her appearance had thrown a last-minute complication into what should have been a straightforward permanency hearing. Judge Winters entered, a silver-haired woman whose kind eyes belied the sharp intelligence that had earned her reputation for fair but uncompromising decisions in child welfare cases. "This is a hearing to determine the permanent placement of Emma Reynolds, age 7, she began, reviewing the case summary. "The state recommends termination of parental rights for both Robert and Vivian Reynolds based on documented severe abuse, medical endangerment and psychological maltreatment." The judge looked up, addressing Claire directly. "Ms. Pembroke, I understand you've petitioned for consideration as a placement option for your niece. While blood relationships are typically given priority, I have concerns about your complete absence from Emma's life until now." Claire smoothed her designer dress, her resemblance to Vivian striking. "Your Honor, I was estranged from my sister for years. Her choice, not mine. I had no knowledge of Emma's situation until I saw news reports of my sister's arrest. As her only maternal aunt, I believe I can provide Emma with a stable home and family connection." Judge Winters' expression remained neutral. "Have you ever met Emma?" "No, Your Honor, but blood is blood. I'm willing to relocate temporarily to allow a transition period." The judge made a note before turning to the Petersons. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, you've been Emma's foster parents for nearly 3 months now. Could you share your observations about her adjustment and current needs?" Thomas Peterson, a retired high school principal, spoke first. "Emma arrived in our home frightened of everything, loud noises, sudden movements, even having enough food. She's made remarkable progress, but consistency and security remain essential for her. She still has nightmares and occasional panic attacks, though they're becoming less frequent." Elizabeth added softly, "Emma needs gentle stability more than anything. She's just beginning to trust that she's safe, that mistakes won't bring punishment. Any major disruption now could set back months of progress." Judge Winters nodded, then addressed Margaret Ellis. "Mrs. Ellis, as Emma's maternal grandmother, you would typically have placement priority, yet you've supported the Petersons as Emma's permanent guardians. Could you explain your reasoning?" Margaret straightened in her seat, her dignity evident despite her obvious emotion. "Your Honor, nothing would bring me greater joy than having Emma in my home, but at 72, with my own health concerns, I question whether I could provide the long-term stability and energy she deserves. The Petersons have opened their hearts and home to Emma and to me, allowing me regular visits and involvement in her life. This arrangement gives Emma both security and family connection." The judge turned lastly to Patricia. Ms. Donovan, as the school counselor who first identified concerns and has continued working with Emma, what is your professional assessment of her needs at this juncture? Patricia chose her words carefully, aware of their weight. Emma has survived extraordinary trauma, physical abuse, psychological manipulation, and now we know deliberate medical endangerment through arsenic poisoning. Her healing requires absolute consistency and individuals she's learned to trust. The Petersons have created an environment where Emma finally feels safe enough to begin processing her experiences. She paused, glancing briefly at Claire. While family connections are valuable, Emma's primary need is for stability with caregivers who understand trauma recovery. Introducing another major change now, particularly with someone she's never met, would significantly compromise her progress. Judge Winters reviewed the written recommendations from Dr. Whitman, Emma's therapist, and the guardian ad litem assigned to represent Emma's legal interests. All aligned in their assessment that the Petersons offered the most appropriate permanent placement. After nearly an hour of careful consideration, including reviewing Emma's medical records and treatment plan for the arsenic poisoning, Judge Winters delivered her ruling. Having considered all testimony and evidence, I find termination of parental rights is in Emma's best interest. Furthermore, I grant permanent guardianship to Thomas and Elizabeth Peterson, with structured visitation rights for Margaret Ellis. She turned toward Claire. Ms. Pembroke, while I appreciate your interest in your niece, Emma's psychological well-being must take priority over biological connection at this time. Should you wish to establish a relationship with her, I recommend working with her therapist to determine appropriate timing and approach. The gavel struck with quiet finality. In the hallway outside, Elizabeth Peterson wiped away tears of relief while Thomas stood solid beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Patricia exchanged glances with June, a shared acknowledgement that today, at least, the system had worked as it should. "Shall we tell Emma?" Margaret asked, her expression reflecting the bittersweet mixture of relief and lingering sorrow. Patricia nodded. "Together, as a family." The children's interview room at the courthouse bore little resemblance to the formal chambers where adult proceedings took place. Walls painted in gentle blues featured whimsical cloud patterns, comfortable furniture replaced imposing benches, and a collection of stuffed animals stood ready to provide silent comfort to young witnesses. Emma sat in a child-sized armchair. Captain Marshmallow, the teddy bear Elizabeth Peterson had given her, clutched tightly against her chest. Despite the room's careful design, anxiety radiated from her small frame as she waited for Judge Winters to arrive. Patricia sat nearby, her presence requested by both Emma and the court. Dr. Whitman, Emma's therapist, occupied another chair, clipboard balanced on her knee. A discreet camera mounted in the corner would record the interview, sparing Emma the trauma of testifying in open court or repeating her story multiple times. "Remember," Patricia said gently, "Judge Winters just wants to hear from you directly. This isn't a test. There are no wrong answers." Emma nodded solemnly, her fingers working the teddy bear's ear. "Will my mom and dad see the video?" "No," Dr. Whitman assured her. "This is just for the judge to understand things better. Your parents won't be allowed to see it." The door opened and Judge Winters entered alone, having left her judicial robes behind in favor of a simple navy dress. She carried a folder and a small box, her expression warm as she took the seat across from Emma. "Hello, Emma. I'm Judge Winters, but you can call me Eleanor if that feels more comfortable." Emma's posture remained rigid. Her years of conditioning, speak only when spoken to, reveal nothing, visibly at war with her tentative trust in the adults who now surrounded her. "Hello?" she finally managed, her voice barely audible. "Judge." Winters opened her folder, revealing not court documents, but a selection of colorful markers. I thought we might draw while we talk. Sometimes that makes conversation easier. She placed a sheet of paper before Emma. Would that be all right? The unexpected approach seemed to ease some of Emma's tension. She nodded, selecting a purple marker, the same color as the cardigan she'd used to hide her bruises that day in the cafeteria, Patricia noted with a pang. Emma, I've read a lot about you, Judge Winters began, sketching abstract patterns on her own paper. But reading reports isn't the same as hearing from someone directly. I'd like to understand how things are going for you now, and what you hope for going forward. Emma concentrated on her drawing, adding careful details to what appeared to be the Peterson home. Things are better now, she said softly. I don't get scared as much. What made you scared before? Emma's marker paused. Lots of things. Loud noises. When people got mad, not knowing the rules. She resumed drawing, adding flowers to the yard. The Petersons have rules too, but they're always the same, and nobody hurts me when I make mistakes. Judge Winters nodded. That's how homes should be, safe, with clear expectations and no hurting. She selected another marker. I understand. You're living with the Petersons now, and visiting regularly with your grandmother. How do you feel about that arrangement? I like it, Emma replied, her voice gaining slight confidence. Mrs. Peterson makes good pancakes, and Mr. Peterson reads chapter books with different voices for each character. Grandmother teaches me about gardening and shows me pictures from when my mom was little. Do you think about your mom and dad? Emma's marker stilled again, her expression closing like a drawing shade. Judge Winters waited patiently, allowing the silence to stretch comfortably. Sometimes, Emma finally admitted, I get confused feelings, like being sad and angry and scared all mixed together. That's very normal, Judge Winters assured her. Complicated feelings are hard even for adults. Emma nodded, adding a small figure to her drawing herself, standing beside the flowers. Dr. Whitman says my mom and dad did bad things because they were sick in their thinking, not because I was bad. But sometimes I still wonder if I could have made things different. Emma, Judge Winters said gently, nothing about what happened. Was your responsibility. Children never cause adults to hurt them, no matter what those adults might say. Emma absorbed this, then asked the question that clearly weighed heaviest on her mind. Do I have to go back to them? Ever? No, Judge, Winters answered firmly. The court has determined that you will stay permanently with the Petersons, with regular visits from your grandmother. Your parents will not have the right to see you or make decisions about your life anymore. Relief visibly washed over Emma's features, though complexity lingered in her eyes. Even when they finished their punishment. Even then. Emma added another figure to her drawing, a small dog. The Petersons said maybe we could get a puppy next spring. One that needs a forever home like me. Judge Winters smiled. That sounds like a wonderful idea. As their conversation continued, Emma gradually relaxed, sharing details about school, her friendship with the Petersons' granddaughter Lily, and her growing interest in science. When Judge Winters opened the small box she'd brought, revealing a special coin she gave to particularly brave children who spoke their truth, Emma accepted it with the first genuine smile she'd shown since entering the room. Thank you for talking with me today, Judge Winters said as their time concluded. Your thoughts and feelings are important, and they help me make better decisions. Emma looked directly at the judge, her voice steady for the first time. Thank you for making sure I can stay with the Petersons. They help me feel safe. After Judge Winters departed, Emma remained in her chair, studying the coin in her palm. Was that my testimony? She asked Patricia. Yes, Patricia confirmed, and you did beautifully. Emma nodded thoughtfully. It wasn't as scary as I thought. The judge really listened. That's her job. Dr. Whitman explained, to listen and to make decisions that keep children safe. I wish, Emma said quietly, tucking the coin carefully into her pocket, that someone had listened a long time ago. The simplicity of the statement, free from self-pity yet profound in its truth, brought tears to Patricia's eyes, not for the suffering in Emma's past, but for the clarity emerging in her healing. The neurodevelopmental clinic at Children's Hospital occupied the entire fourth floor, its waiting area thoughtfully designed with sensory considerations in mind. Muted colors, sound-dampening panels, and varied seating options for different comfort needs. Emma sat between Elizabeth Peterson and Patricia Donovan, leafing through a National Geographic Kids magazine with fascination, seemingly oblivious to the significance of today's appointment. 6 months had passed since Emma had been permanently placed with the Petersons. Her physical recovery from arsenic poisoning had progressed well, the chelation therapy successfully removing toxic levels from her system. But subtle concerns had emerged during her ongoing treatment. Processing delays, organizational challenges, and persistent sensory sensitivities that her medical team believed warranted specialized evaluation. Emma Reynolds, a young woman in colorful scrubs, appeared at the doorway with a tablet in hand. "Dr. Abrams is ready for you." Elizabeth gave Emma's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Ready, sweetheart?" Emma nodded, sliding her hand into Elizabeth's with the casual trust that had developed between them. Patricia followed, her presence requested by both the Petersons and Emma's medical team to provide educational context for the evaluation. Dr. Lila Abrams, a pediatric neuropsychologist with extensive experience in trauma-related developmental concerns, greeted them in a comfortable office. Unlike the clinical examination rooms in other parts of the hospital, this space felt more like a living room, with bookshelves, comfortable seating, and natural light streaming through windows. "Emma, it's nice to meet you," Dr. Abrams said, warmly. "I've heard you're quite the scientist these days." Emma brightened at the recognition of her newest passion. "I'm growing crystals at home and charting weather patterns for my science project." "Impressive," Dr. Abrams smiled, gesturing toward a child-sized desk in the corner. "I have some activities planned for us today. Puzzles, games, questions about how you think and learn. None of it is graded or judged. I'm just trying to understand how your unique brain works." Over the next 3 hours, Emma rotated through various assessments, cognitive tasks, memory exercises, sensory processing evaluations, and fine motor skills activities. Throughout, Dr. Abrams maintained a casual, supportive atmosphere, offering breaks whenever Emma showed signs of fatigue or frustration. Patricia and Elizabeth observed portions of the testing, noting Emma's determined focus, but also her difficulty with certain sequential tasks and multi-step instructions. When Emma became overwhelmed by the sound of a ticking clock, Dr. Abrams immediately recognized her distress and removed the offending timepiece, marking detailed notes about the reaction. After completing the assessments, Emma was escorted to a children's activity room with a child life specialist, while the adults convened to discuss preliminary observations. "Emma is remarkably resilient," Dr. Abrams began, reviewing her notes. "Her cognitive abilities are generally within expected ranges for her age, with notable strengths in visual spatial processing and vocabulary. However, I'm seeing significant challenges in executive functioning, sensory integration, and certain aspects of social cognition." Elizabeth leaned forward. "What exactly does that mean for her day-to-day functioning?" "Emma struggles with organizing information, transitioning between activities, and filtering sensory input," Dr. Abrams explained. "She's working much harder than most children to process her environment, which contributes to her fatigue and occasional emotional dysregulation." Patricia nodded in recognition. We've noticed similar patterns at school. Emma can hyper-focus on subjects that interest her but becomes overwhelmed with group activities or changes in routine. Dr. Abrams pulled up a digital display of test results. Based on today's comprehensive evaluation and your reports from home and school, I believe Emma meets diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder level 1, with accompanying sensory processing differences. The diagnosis hung in the air, unexpected despite the mounting evidence that had prompted the evaluation. Autism, Elizabeth repeated, but we thought her difficulties were related to the trauma and poisoning. This isn't an either-or situation, Dr. Abrams clarified gently. Emma has indeed experienced severe trauma and medical harm, which certainly impact her functioning. However, the underlying neurodevelopmental differences I'm observing appear to be intrinsic to her neurological wiring, not solely consequences of her experiences. Patricia processed this new lens for understanding Emma, so her sensory sensitivities, her intense focus on specific interests, her difficulties with transitions, these aren't just trauma responses. They're likely a combination of her neurological makeup and her experiences, Dr. Abrams confirmed. Many autistic children are particularly vulnerable to trauma effects because of their inherent sensory and processing differences. In Emma's case, her autism was likely present from birth, but went unrecognized amid the chaos of her home environment, possibly even triggering some of the abuse when her neurological differences were misinterpreted as behavioral problems. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears of realization. All those times she was punished for being difficult or defiant. She was simply responding as her autistic brain needed to, Dr. Abrams finished softly, without the understanding or accommodations she required. How do we tell her? Elizabeth asked. Will this be another burden for her to carry? Dr. Abrams smiled reassuringly. Many autistic individuals describe their diagnosis as illuminating, not limiting. It provides explanation, not excuse. For Emma, understanding her neurodivergence can be empowering. Proof that her difficulties weren't character flaws or failures, but different neurological wiring that deserves accommodation and respect. Patricia thought of Emma's meticulous crystal-growing charts, her careful observations of weather patterns, her intense focus on organizing her colored pencils by precise shade gradients, all suddenly appearing not as trauma responses but as beautiful expressions of her unique neurological architecture. This changes how we support her, Patricia said, already mentally adjusting educational strategies. Yes, Dr. Abrams agreed, but it doesn't change who Emma is. She's the same remarkable child she was before this diagnosis. We just understand her better now. Morning sunlight streamed through the bay windows of the Peterson home, catching the dust motes dancing above Emma's science project, a meticulously labeled display chronicling the growth patterns of various crystals. Today marked 1 year since Emma had officially become Emma Peterson, her adoption finalized in a courthouse ceremony attended by everyone who had helped transform her life. Patricia Donovan, June Martinez, Dr. Whitman, Nurse Mercer, and, of course, Margaret Ellis, who had wept openly as the judge declared Emma's new legal status. Thomas Peterson entered the living room carrying a tray of hot chocolate, his silver hair freshly trimmed for today's celebration. The famous scientist appears to be making final adjustments, he observed with gentle humor, setting the tray on the coffee table. The science fair committee won't know what hit them. Emma glanced up, a smile transforming her face. No longer the hesitant expression she'd once offered, but a genuine, unguarded joy. I added more detailed observations about the copper sulfate crystals. They showed the most consistent geometric structure. Elizabeth joined them, carrying a small gift box wrapped in paper decorated with scientific formulas. Happy family? Anniversary, sweetheart. 1 year officially, though you've been our daughter in our hearts much longer. Emma carefully set down her project labels, accepting the package with characteristic deliberation. Unlike most children who tore into presents, she still unwrapped gifts methodically, preserving paper and ribbons, not from fear as before, but from her innate appreciation for order and process, a trait they now understood as part of her autistic neurology. Inside the box lay a delicate silver pendant shaped like a constellation. "It's Cassiopeia," Thomas explained. "The queen who became stars. We thought it suited our stellar girl." Emma examined the necklace, tracing its pattern with her finger. "It's beautiful. Can I wear it to the science fair tomorrow?" "Of course," Elizabeth said, helping her fasten it around her neck. "A proper scientist should have appropriate accessories." The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of their guests. Margaret Ellis entered first, carrying her traditional contribution of homemade snickerdoodles, the baking ritual she and Emma had maintained weekly since their first meeting. Behind her came Patricia Donovan, now principal of Oak Ridge Elementary following Edward Abernathy's retirement, and June Martinez, whose genuine fondness for Emma had long since transcended her professional involvement. The gathering moved to the backyard, where Thomas had prepared a barbecue. The space had transformed over the past year, with Emma's carefully tended garden beds occupying one corner, Buddy the golden retriever's toys scattered across the lawn, and the recently installed sensory swing that provided Emma with necessary vestibular input when school days became overwhelming. As the adults chatted, Emma led Lily, the Petersons' granddaughter who had become her first and closest friend, to show her the new butterfly habitat they'd installed near the fence. "She's flourishing," Patricia observed, watching the girls' animated conversation. "I barely recognize her as the same child from that cafeteria encounter." Elizabeth nodded, though her eyes reflected the complexity of their journey. "We still have challenging days, sensory meltdowns, anxiety spirals when routines change unexpectedly. But now we understand what she needs instead of misinterpreting her responses." "And the nightmares?" June asked quietly. "Less frequent," Thomas replied, though certain triggers still resurface the trauma, the sound of keys jangling, doors closing too firmly. Margaret sipped her lemonade, her expression thoughtful. "She asked about Vivian yesterday. Wanted to know if her mother ever liked to garden, too." These moments still came periodically. Emma's tentative questions about her biological parents, her effort to construct a narrative that made sense of her early years. With guidance from Dr. Whitman, the adults in her life had learned to answer honestly but age-appropriately, neither demonizing her parents nor minimizing the harm they had caused. "What did you tell her?" Patricia asked. "The truth, that Vivian loved growing things when she was young, that we used to plant sunflowers together each spring." Margaret's voice held the particular sorrow of one mourning both the victim and perpetrator simultaneously. Emma said maybe that's where she got her interest in plants from. "She's integrating her story," June noted with professional approval, "finding ways to acknowledge her biological connections without being defined by them." Their conversation paused as Emma approached, Buddy trotting faithfully alongside her. "Can I show everyone my science project now?" Lily already saw it. "Absolutely," Thomas encouraged. "Your audience awaits, Professor Peterson." Emma beamed at the title, straightening her shoulders with newfound confidence. As she led the group inside, Elizabeth hung back momentarily, watching the child who had arrived in their home broken and terrified, now moving through the world with determined curiosity. Patricia remained beside her, understanding the emotion without explanation. "You've created a miracle here," she said, softly, not by erasing her past, but by giving her the safety to process it and the love to move beyond it. "We're just giving her what every child deserves, Elizabeth replied, though pride warmed her voice. A chance to become herself, without fear. Inside, Emma had begun explaining the precise conditions required for optimal crystal formation, her voice animated as she pointed out the variables she had tested. The adults gathered around, their attention genuine, not the forced interest of those humoring a child, but the respectful engagement of a community acknowledging a young scientist's legitimate work. The family that had been shattered beyond recognition now stood rebuilt, different from its original architecture, but stronger in its new formation, held together by bonds more resilient than biology alone could provide. Principal Patricia Donovan stood before the assembled staff of Oak Ridge Elementary, the late August heat only partially mitigated by struggling air conditioners. The faces before her, teachers, counselors, support staff, and administrators, represented the frontline defense in child protection, a responsibility she took more seriously than ever since Emma Reynolds had entered the cafeteria with bruises, hidden beneath a purple cardigan nearly 2 years ago. "Welcome to a new school year," she began, her voice carrying across the gymnasium. "Before we dive into curriculum updates and classroom assignments, I want to focus on our most critical mission, creating a safe environment where we not only educate children, but protect them." The screen behind her illuminated with a simple title, "The Emma Protocol, Comprehensive Child Safety Initiative." The staff shifted forward in their seats, many already familiar with the program's development over the previous semester. 2 years ago, our system failed a child, Patricia continued, her candor setting the tone. Despite multiple warning signs, despite several of us noticing concerning behaviors, we lacked a coordinated approach for addressing potential abuse. Emma Reynolds suffered longer than she should have because we operated as individuals rather than as a unified protective network. She advanced to the next slide, showing a flowchart of communication pathways. The Emma Protocol changes that. It establishes clear channels for reporting concerns, ensures multiple perspectives are considered before conclusions are drawn, and creates accountability at every level. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the school's new full-time psychologist hired specifically to implement the program, joined Patricia at the podium. The protocol's foundation is a shared understanding of trauma indicators, she explained, distributing comprehensive handbooks to each staff member. Not just the obvious physical signs, but the behavioral and emotional markers that are often misinterpreted as simple discipline problems. The presentation continued with Sarah Walker, now the school's teacher development coordinator, demonstrating classroom strategies for creating trauma-sensitive environments and building trust with vulnerable students. "Notice how different this approach is from our previous training," Sarah pointed out. "We're not just looking for bruises or hunger. We're considering patterns, changes in behavior, hypervigilance, inappropriate responses to normal situations. Remember how Emma flinched at sudden movements, hoarded food, became terrified when she spilled water? These weren't isolated incidents, but pieces of a larger picture we failed to assemble." Nurse Elaine Mercer presented next, outlining updated documentation procedures for all health-related observations. "Medical records tell stories if we know how to read them," she emphasized. "The pattern of Emma's fabricated blood disorder would have been identified much sooner if we'd had systematic cross-referencing between schools during transfers." As the morning progressed, the staff participated in scenario exercises, practicing the protocol's implementation with case studies based on disguised real situations. Patricia moved among the groups, observing the discussions and occasionally adding insights. "Remember," she reminded one cluster of kindergarten teachers, "the protocol isn't about becoming amateur detectives or making accusations. It's about ensuring concerns don't fall through cracks, that multiple perspectives are considered, and that follow-up occurs consistently." After lunch, Superintendent William Hargrove joined the session to announce the district-wide adoption of the Emma Protocol, beginning with a pilot program in 5 schools before expanding throughout the county. Oak Ridge Elementary's initiative has already garnered attention from the State Education Department, he informed them with evident pride. Patricia has been asked to present at the National Child Protection in Educational Settings Conference this October. As the afternoon session concluded, Patricia introduced the most powerful speaker of the day, Emma herself, now 9 years old and beginning 4th grade, who had requested to address the staff briefly via pre-recorded video. The gymnasium fell silent as Emma appeared on screen, seated in the Petersons' living room, her newfound confidence evident in her poised delivery. "Hi, I'm Emma Peterson," she began, the name change subtle but significant. "I used to be really scared at school. I thought no one would believe me if I told about the bad things happening at home. But Ms. Donovan noticed something wrong, even when I tried to hide it." She paused, glancing down at notes she'd clearly prepared. "The new protocol means teachers and nurses and counselors will talk to each other when they're worried about a kid. Maybe if this happened before, someone would have helped me sooner." Her final words lingered in the room long after the video ended. Some kids come to school carrying really heavy secrets. They're waiting for a grown-up brave enough to see them and help them put those secrets down. Thank you for being those grown-ups. As the staff dispersed to prepare their classrooms, many wiped away tears. Patricia remained at the podium, gathering her materials while reflecting on the journey from that cafeteria moment to this systemic transformation. Sarah approached, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think it will work? Truly prevent another case like Emma's?" Patricia considered this. The protocol isn't perfect, no system is, but it creates a safety net with fewer holes, a community of vigilance rather than isolated observers. And that gives children a fighting chance. "One noticed child at a time," Sarah murmured, echoing the protocol's concluding principle. "Yes," Patricia agreed, thinking of Emma's thriving presence in the Petersons' home, her budding scientific interests, her slow but steady healing, starting with Emma, but certainly not ending there. Outside, the late summer sun cast long shadows across the playground where, in 1 week's time, children would arrive carrying backpacks, lunchboxes, and sometimes invisible burdens too heavy for small shoulders. This year, Patricia vowed, more of those burdens would be recognized, shared, and ultimately lifted through the collective commitment of adults who refused to look away. Autumn leaves crunched beneath Emma's sneakers as she crossed the playground during morning recess, a dog-eared notebook clutched against her chest. At 10 years old, she moved with a quiet confidence that had gradually replaced the hypervigilance of her earlier years. Her dark hair, once. As the adults chatted, Emma led Lily, the Petersons' granddaughter who had become her first and closest friend, to show her the new butterfly habitat they'd installed near the fence. "She's flourishing," Patricia observed, watching the girls' animated conversation. "I barely recognize her as the same child from that cafeteria encounter." Elizabeth nodded, though her eyes reflected the complexity of their journey. "We still have challenging days, sensory meltdowns, anxiety spirals when routines change unexpectedly. But now we understand what she needs instead of misinterpreting her responses." "And the nightmares?" June asked quietly. "Less frequent," Thomas replied, though certain triggers still resurface the trauma, the sound of keys jangling, doors closing too firmly. Margaret sipped her lemonade, her expression thoughtful. "She asked about Vivian yesterday, wanted to know if her mother ever liked to garden too." These moments still came periodically, Emma's tentative questions about her biological parents, her effort to construct a narrative that made sense of her early years. With guidance from Dr. Whitman, the adults in her life had learned to answer honestly but age-appropriately, neither demonizing her parents nor minimizing the harm they had caused. "What did you tell her?" Patricia asked. "The truth, that Vivian loved growing things when she was young, that we used to plant sunflowers together each spring." Margaret's voice held the particular sorrow of one mourning both the victim and perpetrator simultaneously. "Emma said maybe that's where she got her interest in plants from." "She's integrating her story," June noted with professional approval, "finding ways to acknowledge her biological connections without being defined by them." Their conversation paused as Emma approached, Buddy trotting faithfully alongside her. "Can I show everyone my science project now?" Lily already saw it. "Absolutely," Thomas encouraged. "Your audience awaits, Professor Peterson." Emma beamed at the title, straightening her shoulders with newfound confidence. As she led the group inside, Elizabeth hung back momentarily, watching the child who had arrived in their home broken and terrified, now moving through the world with determined curiosity. Patricia remained beside her, understanding the emotion without explanation. "You've created a miracle here," she said, softly, not by erasing her past, but by giving her the safety to process it and the love to move beyond it. "We're just giving her what every child deserves," Elizabeth replied, though pride warmed her voice. "A chance to become herself without fear." Inside, Emma had begun explaining the precise conditions required for optimal crystal formation, her voice animated as she pointed out the variables she had tested. The adults gathered around, their attention genuine, not the forced interest of those humoring a child, but the respectful engagement of a community acknowledging a young scientist's legitimate work. The family that had been shattered beyond recognition now stood rebuilt, different from its original architecture, but stronger in its new formation, held together by bonds more resilient than biology alone could provide. Principal Patricia Donovan stood before the assembled staff of Oak Ridge Elementary, the late August heat only partially mitigated by struggling air conditioners. The faces before her, teachers, counselors, support staff, and administrators, represented the frontline defense in child protection, a responsibility she took more seriously than ever since Emma Reynolds had entered the cafeteria with bruises, hidden beneath a purple cardigan nearly 2 years ago. "Welcome to a new school year," she began, her voice carrying across the gymnasium. "Before we dive into curriculum updates and classroom assignments, I want to focus on our most critical mission, creating a safe environment where we not only educate children, but protect them." The screen behind her illuminated with a simple title, "The Emma Protocol, Comprehensive Child Safety Initiative." The staff shifted forward in their seats, many already familiar with the program's development over the previous semester. 2 years ago, our system failed a child, Patricia continued, her candor setting the tone. Despite multiple warning signs, despite several of us noticing concerning behaviors, we lacked a coordinated approach for addressing potential abuse. Emma Reynolds suffered longer than she should have because we operated as individuals rather than as a unified protective network. She advanced to the next slide, showing a flowchart of communication pathways. The Emma Protocol changes that. It establishes clear channels for reporting concerns, ensures multiple perspectives are considered before conclusions are drawn, and creates accountability at every level. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the school's new full-time psychologist hired specifically to implement the program, joined Patricia at the podium. The protocol's foundation is a shared understanding of trauma indicators, she explained, distributing comprehensive handbooks to each staff member. Not just the obvious physical signs, but the behavioral and emotional markers that are often misinterpreted as simple discipline problems. The presentation continued with Sarah Walker, now the school's teacher development coordinator, demonstrating classroom strategies for creating trauma-sensitive environments and building trust with vulnerable students. Notice how different this approach is from our previous training, Sarah pointed out. We're not just looking for bruises or hunger. We're considering patterns, changes in behavior, hypervigilance, inappropriate responses to normal situations. Remember how Emma flinched at sudden movements, hoarded food, became terrified when she spilled water? These weren't isolated incidents, but pieces of a larger picture we failed to assemble. Nurse Elaine Mercer presented next, outlining updated documentation procedures for all health-related observations. Medical records tell stories if we know how to read them, she emphasized. The pattern of Emma's fabricated blood disorder would have been identified much sooner if we'd had systematic cross-referencing between schools during transfers. As the morning progressed, the staff participated in scenario exercises, practicing the protocol's implementation with case studies based on disguised real situations. Patricia moved among the groups, observing the discussions and occasionally adding insights. Remember, she reminded one cluster of kindergarten teachers, the protocol isn't about becoming amateur detectives or making accusations. It's about ensuring concerns don't fall through cracks, that multiple perspectives are considered, and that follow-up occurs consistently. After lunch, Superintendent William Hargrove joined the session to announce the district-wide adoption of the Emma Protocol, beginning with a pilot program in 5 schools before expanding throughout the county. Oak Ridge Elementary's initiative has already garnered attention from the State Education Department, he informed them with evident pride. Patricia has been asked to present at the National Child Protection in Educational Settings Conference this October. As the afternoon session concluded, Patricia introduced the most powerful speaker of the day, Emma herself, now 9 years old and beginning 4th grade, who had requested to address the staff briefly via pre-recorded video. The gymnasium fell silent as Emma appeared on screen, seated in the Petersons' living room, her newfound confidence evident in her poised delivery. "Hi, I'm Emma Peterson," she began, the name change subtle but significant. "I used to be really scared at school. I thought no one would believe me if I told about the bad things happening at home. But Ms. Donovan noticed something wrong, even when I tried to hide it." She paused, glancing down at notes she'd clearly prepared. "The new protocol means teachers and nurses and counselors will talk to each other when they're worried about a kid. Maybe if this happened before, someone would have helped me sooner." Her final words lingered in the room long after the video ended. Some kids come to school carrying really heavy secrets. They're waiting for a grown-up brave enough to see them and help them put those secrets down. Thank you for being those grown-ups. As the staff dispersed to prepare their classrooms, many wiped away tears. Patricia remained at the podium, gathering her materials while reflecting on the journey from that cafeteria moment to this systemic transformation. Sarah approached, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think it will work? Truly prevent another case like Emma's?" Patricia considered this. The protocol isn't perfect, no system is, but it creates a safety net with fewer holes, a community of vigilance rather than isolated observers. And that gives children a fighting chance. "One noticed child at a time," Sarah murmured, echoing the protocol's concluding principle. "Yes," Patricia agreed, thinking of Emma's thriving presence in the Petersons' home, her budding scientific interests, her slow but steady healing, starting with Emma, but certainly not ending there. Outside, the late summer sun cast long shadows across the playground where, in 1 week's time, children would arrive carrying backpacks, lunchboxes, and sometimes invisible burdens too heavy for small shoulders. This year, Patricia vowed, more of those burdens would be recognized, shared, and ultimately lifted through the collective commitment of adults who refused to look away. Autumn leaves crunched beneath Emma's sneakers as she crossed the playground during morning recess, a dog-eared notebook clutched against her chest. At 10 years old, she moved with a quiet confidence that had gradually replaced the hypervigilance of her earlier years. Her dark hair, once